Hello, and welcome to Casually Speaking. I'm Robert Kinzel with Nomium Consulting. We are having a webinar today about presentation. We've taken some questions from our audience all over the world on social media, and we're going to be answering some of those questions about presentation today. We will have more and more webinars, so if you have a question about anything related to communication, specifically persuasive communication, we'd love to hear from you on one of our social media sites, or you're always welcome to send us an email. I'm the Senior Consultant with Nomium Consulting, and I'm joined today by KC Tong. KC, why are you here today to discuss presentation?
Well, for a start, I work in the education line, so presentation is something that I get to do a lot of times, and it is something that I do have a passion for because we've all been through that. Sitting through presentations that we don't really like. So to have a chance to talk about presentations, I think is something that's very exciting. And hopefully from there we can share some great ideas, which I can also take back to my line of work.
Excellent. One reason I invited KC is he's been involved in Toastmasters International for many years. He's been on the district leadership team, and he's worked in many different countries with global audiences, getting feedback, giving feedback, and helping others improve their communication and presentation skills. So thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
All right, we're going to jump right into it. The first question we have comes from Rod Rothwell in Seoul, Korea, and he says, business storytelling is my main query. How can I convince skeptical clients of its value? I'd like to start this one off. Rod and the rest of our audience, one of the hottest topics right now in business communication is using stories. Even if you have an internal business meeting with a lot of data, a lot of facts, a lot of figures, adding a very short story, 30 seconds or 1 minute, will help the audience understand the reason why you're there speaking to them, what those facts and figures really mean, and how they might apply to you, the speaker, or ideally how they apply to the audience. So go look at some of the research, go look at some of the resources on why business storytelling is so important. And there's a key story I love to tell when we talk about business storytelling. It comes from the book Made to Stick. It's by Chip and Dan Heath. Chip Heath used to teach at Harvard Graduate School of Business. And he did an experiment where he would have his students give a 1-minute impromptu speech. And they take an idea, for example, why is nonviolent crime serious? Or why is nonviolent crime not serious? They'd give a great speech for 1 minute, and then he had everybody sit down, watch TV for 10 minutes, and then he came back and said, pop quiz, write down everything that you can remember about those speeches today. Here's what he found out. Most students can't remember 1 or 2 ideas. 5% of his students can remember statistics, but 90% of his students used statistics to make their point. So almost everyone's using statistics, but almost nobody is remembering them. When people heard stories, 63% of his students could remember the stories that were told, but only 10% of his students are actually using stories. So we need facts, figures, we need statistics, but they're not memorable. If we want to persuade somebody, start with a story, help them understand the concept. How does it tie to them or our business? What emotional connection can we make as humans? Then once we understand that, now we're ready to hear your details, your facts and statistics.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing is, when we talk about stories, sometimes we also have to understand who we are really speaking to. Sometimes there will be people who are better at digesting facts and figures. So sometimes the story may not necessarily work for them. And if you only have like 2 minutes to bring your point across, your story might take up 2 minutes already, and you haven't got time to really talk about your point. So it also depends on what kind of presentations you are trying to make and what is the effect or the desired effect at the end of the day. If, like what Bob said, you're trying to make a point, you're trying to persuade someone, stories are great options.
Absolutely. If somebody says, hey, we have 30 seconds, give me the sales report, don't tell them a story.
Yeah.
You know, there is a great time and a great place for it. And if you'd like to hear more about storytelling, the reason storytelling works, why we should be using it in business, we'd love to send you some research, send you some articles. Get a hold of us on social media or send us an email. Let's move on. Our next question comes from Russ Hauser in Japan. He says, if I get nervous when speaking, should I really picture my audience naked?
Well, some people get turned on when they imagine people naked. So if you are one of those, my suggestion is that you don't. But for myself, I do have actually a little bit of a habit of anchoring people in the audience. For example, there will be someone who is always nodding at what you're saying. There will be someone who is smiling at you or maybe looking at you attentively. Those are my anchors. When I focus my attention on those people, I actually get a little bit more confidence. I get a little bit more energy and power from them, so I could actually continue with my presentation. And let's face it, if we were to speak to an audience that look hostile, we get freaked out. So, but I don't believe that everyone will be hostile. So there will always be one or two people who is willing to give you a positive face. So anchor your attention onto them and probably get some energy from those people. I think it worked for me.
Yeah, excellent point. You know, I tell people the best way to get over nervousness is prepare. It's giving speeches over time and becoming comfortable on stage, comfortable with new audiences. But people get nervous. You know, and a new audience is going to make even professional speakers nervous.
Yeah.
The more we prepare our specific presentation, the more comfortable with it we are. We have that belief, yes, this is going to end up well. Yes, I have good voice, I have good body language, I have good ideas that have been tailored for my audience.
Exactly.
There's breathing exercises, there's physical exercises that we can do that really do help us decrease nervousness and physical nervousness, but honestly, it comes down to preparation and being comfortable with what we're going to say.
Definitely.
Excellent. Our next question is a common question that I get in presentation training and also in Toastmasters International. Do I need PowerPoint?
Well, I read in a book, I think it was by Seth Godin. He actually said that PowerPoint is a great tool. You think it is, but it really isn't. In fact, most PowerPoint presentations suck rotten eggs. So there is your answer. But I would say it is not necessarily a bad thing. If you have a good set of PowerPoint presentations, use them because it does help you to try to get your point across. For most people, they look at a few things when they're listening to a presentation. They listen to what the speaker has to say, and they also look for visuals. Sometimes when you have certain visual elements within your presentations, it actually helps a lot. For example, if I were to tell you right now, there is an increase of 200% in the sales of a certain product. If I were to just tell you in your face, you probably don't really get it. But if you show it on a chart, and of course you use the chart to your advantage, then people will say, wow, 200% is a great jump. Of course, you can play with the graphics, you can play with the charts to try to bring your point across, but don't look at it as something that you really get frightened doing or you get too pressurized into doing. I think at the end of the day, as the name suggests, PowerPoint is there to help, to give you more power to actually make a point. So I think that would be my thoughts.
Absolutely. The question for me is this adding value to my speech? Is this helping the audience understand an idea? If I was going to describe my brother, I can describe what my brother looks like, or I can throw a picture of him up on the screen, and that's going to help people get it right away. But I always say, be ready to give your presentation without PowerPoint, because what if the tech fails?
Exactly.
And what are you going to do if you don't have your PowerPoint? How are you going to adapt? Are you still going to be able to carry on? One of the key things I tell people to look at is the World Championship of Public Speaking in Toastmasters International. There's about 100 people from around the world that go to this international contest, to the finals every single year. None of them use PowerPoint. The presentation is the speaker, their ideas, their voice, and their body language. That's what's important on stage. If PowerPoint helps the audience understand, use it. If not, don't waste your time.
Yeah, and if you might recall, if you have gone through some of the TED Talks, a lot of them even if they have PowerPoints, if they have presentation slides, it's really there to help them bring the point across. At the end of the day, most people still focus on what is being spoken rather than what is being shown on the screen. So there you have it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a word of caution, sometimes we give presentation training and we hear feedback from some of our clients and they say, my manager requires PowerPoint. My manager requires a specific template. Follow your manager's advice.
Yep.
Maybe they haven't taken presentation and PowerPoint training, and maybe they should.
Yeah.
But if they say, use this template, follow these guidelines, obviously don't lose your job or make your manager angry, and then email us and say, we followed your advice and I got fired. But when we have the freedom,
yes.
you know, there's and we will have another Casually Speaking webinar specifically about visuals and about PowerPoint. We can go into the rules and the guidelines that are the best practices. Yeah. We can also send those as resources, as mentioned, but that's another webinar.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at 3 more before we finish today. What is a common presentation mistake that you've seen in your professional experience?
Wow. People do make a lot of mistakes as far as presentations are concerned. But for me, I think the biggest mistake that some of us do have, me included, is that we think our presentations are too important for the audience to miss. So we always have this thinking that, oh, the audience must listen to what I have for them, otherwise they're going to miss out on a great deal. But in truth, most people, if given a choice, they don't really want to sit in the presentation because it's going to take a lot of time. They have to try to digest a lot of things. And most of the time, it does give people the kind of feeling that, okay, why am I here? What's in it for me? So, in fact, the what's in it for me is a favorite question for people who are thinking about speeches, thinking about presentations, on how they actually should be approaching the whole presentation. Because at the end of the day, the audience is the king. You want to make them listen. So you have to cater to them. But for a lot of us, we kind of have the misconception that, hey, I'm here to tell you something great. You better listen to me. But in truth, that doesn't always happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
On a similar note, one of the biggest mistakes I see is people who are very knowledgeable and they have 10 great ideas, but they only have 5 to 10 minutes. They try to put in all of those ideas. Oh, yeah. They touch on them, they touch on them, they touch on them. Now they make sense to the speaker because they've studied it, they've lived through it. Yeah. The audience, though, hasn't heard enough details. Yeah. They haven't heard the stories that go with those ideas, and it's simply not real, and it's hard to really envision and understand for those audience members. Yeah. So we recommend cover 2 or 3 ideas in 5 to 10 minutes, really have an understanding with the audience. And don't forget that in most programs and most persuasive presentations, there's follow-up. Yeah. There's emails, there's question and answer sessions, there's handouts, and for long-term projects, there's additional meetings. We don't need steps 1 through 10. We need steps 1, 2, and 3. 4, 5 through 10 can come with our later meetings, handouts, and other types of communication.
Yeah. In fact, if you were to say too much, there probably isn't the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. The whole idea is get people interested to take the next step. What do you want them to do? Do you want them to join your baseball team? That's great. But you don't have to convince them today to join your baseball team and to actually show up on the field with their equipment, their bat. Have them come to the next lunch meeting about that baseball team. That's where we're going to have people sign up and ordering uniforms and whatnot.
Exactly.
Yep. All right, 2 more. The next one comes from Nava Tentarev in the Netherlands. Nava says, where should I pause in presentations? And what about breathing? Well, we want to breathe naturally. If you've practiced your presentation, you've become comfortable with it, you'll breathe naturally. If you're not breathing naturally, record yourself on video and watch yourself. See where you're breathing, see where you're pausing, and if it doesn't feel comfortable, possibly mark some places in your script to pause and stop, catch your breath, and move on. Remember, if we're not putting 10 points in a short presentation, we have time to breathe.
Yes.
For pauses, for long pauses, before an important point creates suspense. It gets the audience's attention and it gets them ready to hear that important idea. And after an important point, gives them time to think and really process what they've heard. Pause finished.
Yeah. I think one very important thing I want to talk about pauses is that they must be natural. How do I tell whether a pause is natural? Well, you as a speaker, you picked up signals from the audience. If it's a comfortable pause, you want people to think about certain things, the audience reaction will tell you. But if it's an awkward pause, you feel it as well. So, of course, it takes practice. There really isn't a fixed rule that's saying that, okay, this is a 5-second pause. A 5-second pause for every 1 or 2 important points. No, that's not how things work. So always feel natural. When you feel natural, things are always at its best. And in fact, I have a little story to share, just a short one. When I was in college, I used to do a lot of presentations for assignments or for my student union. And I always have this problem of losing my breath when I'm speaking. And after that, I realized, because I get too excited, so I tend to speak very fast. And when I speak very fast, I find that I'm losing breath very quickly. So again, like what Bob has said, if you're not going to say everything under the sun, you know what you're going to talk about, you're prepared, then you can easily pace out your speech so that you don't feel too excited, overly excited about during your presentations. It's good to be excited, but not overdoing it.
Absolutely. All right. Our final question today comes from Amanda Greenwood in Seoul, Korea. We started with a question from Korea. We're going to end with a question from Korea. What if an audience member distracts me?
We get it all the time, don't we? My suggestion is that be prepared. What do I mean by be prepared? Be prepared that there will be people distracting you. I think that's very important because a lot of times we hope to go through presentations hoping that no one would distract you. No one would suddenly just heckle you, throw you a question, but we all know that's not going to happen. If we know that's not going to happen, be prepared for it. If you're in a business meeting, be prepared for a question from the manager, from the director. If you're in baseball team recruitment presentation, be prepared that people might ask you how's the team's doing. So when I talk about presentations, preparations for these kind of distractions, my suggestion would be look at your presentation, look at what you have. Take out the points where potential distractions would come in. Think about what kind of distractions would come in and prepare accordingly. Let's say, for example, if you are going to talk about things like a return on investment, you are going to say, this is what I think is going to happen. Then a potential distraction would be, how did you come up with that? Be prepared to answer that question. So when you are prepared, you find yourself dealing well with these distractions, then you're doing pretty good. Of course, sometimes distractions are not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes they could be a funny joke. Maybe if it's the best man speech at a wedding, one of the groom's friends suddenly just throw up something funny for everyone to laugh at. That's not necessarily a bad distraction. In fact, it helps you to get the mood in a much more jovial way, and people feel happy, people have a laugh, and you can continue from there. So don't always look at distractions as a bad thing. Sometimes they could be good, and if it's not really good, be prepared for them. I think that's what I would think.
Absolutely. If we take a course and we want to learn how to drive a car, we're going to be preparing for potential accidents. What do we do when someone's coming at us? What do we do if someone pulls out in front of us? We learn defensive driving. The same thing works with presentations.
Yes.
We don't know always what's coming at us, but we can predict it.
Yeah.
We can, if we have 10 points, but we're only covering 3 in a short presentation,
Mm-hmm.
what are the other points the audience might ask afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
Be prepared to give those answers.
Mm-hmm.
If we're speaking in a certain environment, whether it's at a dinner meeting or whether it's in a sales meeting, we know in a dinner meeting there's going to be noises of plates and forks and knives. We know in a sales meeting somebody might ask us a question if they're a potential client or a
Mm-hmm.
consumer. There's going to be these questions we can prepare for. But we can also have practice over time.
Yeah.
If we are only giving presentations to a quiet audience.
Mhm.
We're not getting the experience to deal with those distractions. So if we are preparing with colleagues, ask people, interrupt me once or twice in my presentation. Ask me a question once or twice so I can practice handling that. If we are in Toastmasters International, we know most audiences are quiet. Prompt the audience and tell them, I'm inviting 3 interruptions. Make them good. But I'd like 3 interruptions today during my presentation because I want to get practice dealing with it. Handling it, whether it's a positive way to handle it or sometimes it's shutting down the person and telling them, please be quiet while the speakers are on stage. But usually it's positive, and we can handle it, we can answer the question, and then we can pick back where we stopped, pick back up right where we left off in the presentation before the distraction. Also, even if you memorize your presentation, bring notes, put them in your pocket. Note cards are better than paper. If you get stuck, if you get distracted and your mind goes blank, reach in your pocket, find where you were, and continue.
I think that's very good advice as well. And a lot of times, I think having a very positive mindset towards a presentation, towards the audience is also very important. Sometimes some people go into presentation thinking that the audience is there to make their lives difficult, but in most cases they don't. So even if there are distractions, don't go in thinking that, oh, these people are trying to make my life difficult. They probably aren't. They probably just want to find out more by asking a question, asking you to clarify a few things. And in fact, if you handle those things well, it could mean a lot of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. When people make a comment or ask a question, they're involved, they're engaged. So you've activated your audience. It's better than having a question and answer session where everyone goes,
oh yeah,
it's time for lunch, right? So
yeah.
All right. Well, Casey, thank you for coming to our Casually Speaking webinar. It's been a pleasure having you.
My pleasure being here as well. Thank you for inviting.
You're very welcome. Thank you, audience around the world, for the questions. Thank you, audience around the world, for watching. And we'll be doing more webinars in the future. Check out our social media for the topics that are coming up in the future. And we'd love to hear your questions. We'd love to hear your comments. And if you're here in Hong Kong or wherever we happen to be, we'd love to have you on as a guest if you have something to add. So have a great night.
Have a great night.